This conference will now be recorded.
Bear with me. Okay. I'm all right. Can you guys see the tiles okay? The presentation, the appearing, I hope.
If you can see the tiles, type yes in the chat for Rose.
Okay.
You're looking good, Rose.
All right.
Everybody's saying yes.
Now, unfortunately, my little, oh, okay, wait, hold on a second. All right, hold on. I need to restart this. My little icons at the bottom of the screen to start the presentation were not visible to me, so I was randomly trying to find them.
You're just hitting buttons?
Yeah, okay. So, hello. So I wanted to go over active reading strategies and effective note taking for you guys today. Basically, the purpose of having like reading strategies is to help maximize the time that you put into your studies. I just heard a considerable amount of concerns regarding the lack of time. So if you could read effectively and take notes effectively, you're going to avoid times when you're wasting time. So reading a textbook or an academic writing assignment is absolutely different from reading a novel. Obviously, a novel is something you read for pleasure, whereas assigned reading often leads to writing assignments, and which force thought and understanding. You're likely to have to write like whatever topic or a concept that you're reading about. You're likely to have to reflect on that and write a paper or an essay or just it could be a test question. So it's important to have some strategies to tackle that. The content for academic reading also is usually more serious and more scholarly, which inevitably some of the material could be very difficult to comprehend. So, you know, your first read, you might kind of gloss over it and, you know, but it does need to be revisited. So that, you know, the whole reading process is you immersing yourself into the material. It's not just going to, your professors are not going to be spoon feeding you everything. You have to be engaged with this whole process, and reading is a big factor in that. But before we move on to actual strategies, I did want to talk about barriers to effective reading. So there's maybe some of you love reading and really do it well, and your comprehension level is really great, and that's fabulous. For others, they may struggle with that, and that could be very problematic, especially when you're trying to learn material. So I'm going to have Lisa monitor the chat, but I'm going to put up 4 different reasons for why students tend to not read. So the first one is my textbooks are boring, or I don't like to read. So what strategies or advice would you have for a student who kind of has that mindset, and so they therefore avoid reading? Can anybody think of anything?
Just go ahead and type in the chat, guys.
This one's a little difficult, and because it does have to do with motivation. You know, if it's something you really dislike to do, you absolutely, Sarah, you have to force yourself. And because, you know, when you think
Read it
of
anyway.
exactly, every class that you take is a rung on the ladder to your success of achieving that end goal of a degree. So there's going to be classes that you're not going to be too fond of, or professors you're not going to be too fond of, or you're not going to maybe 100% mesh. That's part of life, right? We don't get to live in a bubble where everything's wonderful. You know, it's not Pleasantville. I don't know if anybody remembers that movie. But so trying to find
Christy says, think of the end goal. Try
absolutely.
to find an interest in it.
Yep,
Tiffany just wants to get her assignment done.
yep. And then you can reward yourself after doing that reading with looking at your cell phone messages. Right?
Exactly. That's the kind of thing
Your-
they're talking
your
about.
Facebook. But one of the other things to do is also to create a positive affirmation about reading. And the more you say, I enjoy reading books and articles of all kinds, the more you say that to yourself, the more hopefully you'll believe it, and you'll be more open to learning new information. What about I can't concentrate? You guys think of any strategies to overcome that?
Put some music on that can help you study, says Christy.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That song I sent you guys the link to on YouTube, that is a great one. Tiffany says, try to find a quiet place in the house, which for some of us, that's impossible. I live with a bunch of Cubans, and there is no such thing as a quiet place in my house. Solomon says, go to a library like mine, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Nimrod says, read out loud, but not in the library, Nimrod, just, saying.
Maybe you just whisper if you're in the library. But
Have
perfect.
great lighting, Christy says.
Yep.
Have your text read to you, so that is a function in Cengage, of course.
Yep.
So how many of you guys I'm sorry, Rose, but how many of you guys
That's okay.
listen to podcasts? Type in the chat if you listen to podcasts. Sometimes some people do. So the thing about what you can do with your textbooks is you can listen to it like you would a podcast the first time around. You can listen to your book being read to you while you're washing the dishes or while you're, folding laundry, things
Yep.
like that. So for those of you who like to listen to things and you learn better by listening, that is an option for your textbook.
Absolutely. So the item that I indicated was to create a location free from distractions. And I know, again, that is a challenge and a half. But if you invest in doing that, you will allow a much more, or create a much more effective reading experience for yourself. So what about, I fall asleep when I read? What are your thoughts on that?
How can you prevent yourself from falling asleep while you read? Coffee, says Edward. Dina says, don't read in your room, which I think she means don't read in your bed. Read out loud. Tiffany and Bari have suggested. Exercise and see, oh, that's a great idea, Christy. So one of the things that I do is if I feel myself starting to lag, I will get up and move around and stretch, cross your arms, cross your legs, stretch, do that kind of thing. And that will help you get your blood flowing and keep you awake. So that's a great idea, Christy.
Yep.
Read after you wake up when you are fully awake. I don't know if I'm fully awake after I wake up.
Right. So maybe after a cup or two of coffee, but that is,
Sponsored by WCC.
Identifying your prime time. Some people are not morning people, and it takes them a few hours to kind of launch their day. So if you're identifying the time frames that you are at your best and can receive and retain that information, that is, definitely recommended. So yes, don't read while you're sitting in your comfy bed. That was something I did, and because that was my quiet space.
Good job, Dina. You got that one.
But then I would go, sit down on my bed with my books and everything laid out, and as I'm reading, because I'm propped up with, down pillows and whatnot, 5 minutes later I'm asleep. So, by sitting in a well-lit desk or table, someplace that isn't uncomfortable, but it's not so conducive to sleep is the best. So the last one I have is, so a person reads for hours, but they don't understand what they've read. What suggestions would you have? Strategies to overcome that? Any thoughts?
Not yet. Tiffany says, take notes and write down words that you need to look up later. Highlight important sections to reread later, Sarah says. Dina says, all of these apply to me, so I do need help. We got your back, Dina. Edward, ask for someone else's perspective. Solomon, read it again. And then, I knew what you meant, though. I read what he said, even though he didn't say it correctly. Read in reverse. What, Tiffany? Read in reverse?
So yeah,
Read in reverse?
what read in reverse means is, like, if you're reading your textbook, go to the questions at the end of the chapter first. And read those questions first to say, because those questions suggest what the author and your professor would likely want you to know. And so
Right.
then when you go back and you read the textbook, you're reading for those answers. You're trying to find it. So even
That's
if
like,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, that's like we were talking about before you even start your week for your class, read the discussion board and read the assignment before you start doing the reading.
Yep.
Christy
Because
said,
that will lay the foundation. And
Christy
that's
has a
actually
great
one of
idea.
that's part of the strategies that we're going to be discussing, but that's absolutely correct.
Christy and Kevin both have really great ideas that involve using pictures, diagrams, drawings, and you're being able to visualize what you're reading. And that is a great strategy, especially if you're a visual learner. And Dina likes to look up videos. I agree. I'm with you 100% on that, especially in math. I find that it helps to look up videos. Christy, I got your back. We got that.
And the drawing piece, that's really called mind mapping. And you can even find videos on how to do mind mapping. And it's a really good visual way, especially if you're trying to write a paper, to try to get organized with what are the things you want to talk about. I know I get writer's block, and I'm like, oh, I don't know where to start. What do I want to do? How do I bring it all together? And that's one of the things. It might not be a full-on mind map, but I'll start to outline and try to bridge everything together so that way it makes sense and it has good flow when you read through it.
Yep, and actually, I have a couple of examples with that. And my cat Lucas has decided to join the party here. So I have also indicated that if you divide your reading into smaller readable chunks and take breaks, it'll help increase your comprehension and reduce your overall reading time. Sorry. Okay. So now we'll get into the active reading strategies. And basically implementing these strategies can help you prepare for, excuse me, writing about whatever you read, because like I said, oh, yes. Sorry. I apologize, guys. So basically what you're reading about is information that you're likely to obviously need to know because it's part of the course. But you will need to be able to access that information. So you want to, the first strategy is pre-read. So it absolutely includes reviewing the chapter summary, any abstracts, class notes, or even online reviews to provide some insight on what's going to be covered. Chapter titles and objectives, the focus questions, text headings, charts, graphs, illustrations. You want to, and previews and summaries also help to create that big picture. Think of it as, you know, when you go to, or going to a movie, you want to see the previews so that, you know, you can determine as to whether or not you want to go to see that movie. You don't necessarily have a choice about the information being presented to you. You don't get to have the full-on option of saying, yeah, I don't think I want to learn about this. I mean, I guess you could, but your success, you won't be as successful in the class if you opt not to read. So also, if you take a look at the textbooks, the headings that are indicated within it, turn those headings into questions, and then that way you can, if it's a topic you're unfamiliar with, you can be like, well, what is this? And then as you're reading, you're already investigating and trying to find the answer. So another strategy is to mark up the text. Now, granted, with Cengage, you've got, you know, they're online textbooks, but you can print. I personally, I like that textile feeling of turning pages and taking out my highlighter and making notes on things. That's just my preference. And I know that you can certainly have things printed out if needed, I believe. Lisa, is that accurate from the library still?
Well, we right now I'm not sure because nobody's allowed in the library but me at the moment, and we don't have curbside pickup.
Oh, okay.
So normally you'd be able to print parts of your textbook, but I'm not sure what's going to happen in the fall in terms of students being able to print. My suggestion is going to be that students send me what they need to print, and then I can print it for them and drop it somewhere where they can pick it up. But as of right now, I don't know what that's going to look like. Tiffany, do you have any idea?
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
But I would say even if you send something to Lisa to print, that Lisa, I can get you the student's address, and I have a postage account, and you can drop it in the mail. And that way, I mean, it's not that timely, that's for sure. It'll take a couple of days to get, I think at least a day to get to them, but certainly the mail will go out. Or even if I go and just get some stamps or something, you know, through the program, we'll be able to do that. I was just going to add something. Oh my gosh, Rose, you were saying something. Oh, for Cengage, you know, while you have your electronic subscriptions, remember when finally the CARES Act funding goes through, that you can rent the textbooks from Cengage for, I believe it's like $7.99, and with tax it comes to like $8 and change. So even if you have 4 or 5 classes, the cost is way less than purchasing one textbook. And you're able to, at no cost to you, mail them back, even if it's just a box and you don't have a box, I'll send you a box, I don't care. But if you want to have the touch and feel and have that textbook in front of you like you might be used to from high school, that is an option. And I would say use some of your CARES money, and then for spring semester you can use some of your fall refund check so that you always have that hard copy in front of you.
That's a great idea. And in doing that, so obviously if you're renting the book, you're not, although I'm suggesting to read with a pencil in hand and make notes, it doesn't necessarily, if you're renting the book or even viewing your textbook online, have a notebook handy and indicate page whatever or topic whatever, and indicate like a topic on the notes itself, on the page itself, for you to be able to easily identify and retrieve that information when it comes time for test review or writing a paper or something along those lines. And again, you can highlight those notes, or if you do have your own copy of the textbook, or you did print things out, you can obviously then do the highlighting, the underline, circle, bracket your passages that you want to bring your attention to. But the other thing for rentals is Post-it notes. They make those little small Post-it notes, and you can make notes, and they come in a variety of colors. So if that helps you too, to kind of categorize, develop some sort of visual strategy for yourself to tend to those.
And Rose, all of the students received Post-it notes in their workshop in a box, or
Awesome.
they got Post-it notes actually, I believe, in their pencil boxes, with their flash drives and pencils and pens and staplers and whatnot. So definitely utilize the 2 packs of Post-it notes that you received. And if you need more Post-it notes, just let me know, and I'll make sure that you have what you need if you're not able to purchase it yourself.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
Yep.
So the next strategy is take reading notes. So you're going to want to make more detailed notes, as that will be more helpful to include your thoughts, your ideas, your questions. Jotting down things as you go along, topics or something, and highlighting topics. I don't know, sometimes people's handwritings, I know this happens for myself. If I'm in a meeting or something and I'm taking a lot of notes, sometimes I can't even read what I wrote, or so if the more detail you are able to put into your notes, the reading notes, the better off you'll be to be able to understand what it is you were trying to highlight and bring your attention to. By reading and marking the main ideas and supporting details and including that in those reading notes will be helpful. So strategy number 4 is a 5-minute reflective writing. So you basically could use this time, and the purpose of doing it is so that it helps to summarize what you've read. So one aspect of how you can utilize that 5-minute reflection time, just free write, uninterrupted, unedited, all things you can remember about the passage or the 5 pages you just read, and just to reiterate it for yourself. Another way to use that 5-minute time is quick questions. Identify the most interesting, important, unexpected, confusing information, and then generate some questions, and then go back and look for the answers. So you could also use that 5 minutes of reflection by just jotting down 5 to 6 sentences about what you've read, to help you, again, it reinforces this information to stay with you. And the final recommendation to use that 5-minute reflection time is a quotation bank. Transcribe the most important passages, include the page number for possible use in your paper. You know, again, you're going to be, as you're working with this material, and, you know, I'm sure you'll come to a point where it'd be like, oh yeah, I wanted to include this important aspect into my paper, and it's some around here somewhere. So if you organize your notes and take the time to organize it in as much detail as you're able to do to keep it making sense to you, that it will be a time saver in the end when you're trying to retrieve this information. Okay, so the final strategy is reread, and reread again. So I know you don't want to hear that, but the more, again, the more you're exposed to the information, and even having that voice to text or text to voice feature on Cengage, that also counts, because you're basically you're obtaining that information in multiple ways, and the more you're exposed to it, the more it's going to be ingrained, and it'll just make things easier for you. So no academic writing assignment will succeed upon one single reading. You're just not going to retain that information. So your understanding will change and evolve with each subsequent reading. And again, that also includes the Cengage voice to text to voice feature. You're going to be exposed to more, and when you hear things more, when you see things more than once, you're going to notice things that you didn't notice before, or it might take on a deeper meaning for you. So I have this little thing that I love this, and I'm going to show you on the screen something that will look a little garbled, but I want you to take a few minutes to try to read it, and then I'm going to ask for a volunteer for somebody to read it out loud to us. Okay? So check this out.
Jabari says, oh my.
Is this English? Are we supposed to read this?
Try reading it to yourselves, and then all right, so Sarah has volunteered to read it out loud. All right, Sarah, go ahead and share these words of wisdom.
It says, I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind. According to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? Yeah, and I always thought spelling was important.
Pretty cool, right? So the reason why I wanted to share this with you guys is that we also have a tendency, our brains literally fill in blanks that aren't necessarily there. So when we're reading information, sometimes it can be very easy to misread words, and especially if they're very similar. So the other thing is when you're writing as well, we have a tendency to do that. We might use a word with a different meaning than the one that we really are wanting to include in our writing. So it's important to you know, when you're reading your own writing, read out loud and get a second set of eyes reviewing your information. So that way you're not filling the gaps of that material to suit what you're think you're wanting to say as opposed to what's literally on the page. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention. And also to encourage you, if you do have papers that are due, definitely, you know, schedule some time with one of our English tutors, and they'd be happy to review and assist you in with the proper formatting and just, you know, overall edit suggestions and things like that. That's what they're there for. All right. So thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you reading that. There's some additional tips, excuse me, for reading effectively. You want to ensure that your study area is conducive to the task at hand, free from distractions. You know, Tiffany mentioned this earlier about, or somebody did, I believe, reading, having some music on that's will help filter out background noise, so it becomes your own white noise. I wouldn't, you know, maybe the top dance hits aren't maybe not the best, you know, that will keep, well, maybe it is, because then for your breaks you can get up and stretch and do that exercise. But on the flip side, you know, some people find, you know, an instrumental kind of music, whatever's going to float your boat to keep your mind going, but filter out that extraneous sounds of even your family members' cell phones going off. You also want to monitor your comprehension as you're reading. So make sure you look up unfamiliar words and concepts. And I'm going to skip down a couple of bullets and consider creating a vocabulary list with as a journal. So that way you can incorporate those words into your vocabulary, and you'll have, you know, more connection with that. So going back up to the third bullet, highlight, underline your text, or take notes as you read each section. Now, this was interesting too that I found. They say that if you concentrate on reading faster, there's an experiment that found that students actually improved their speed of reading by 25 to 50% by merely deciding to read faster. And I will share with you, for most of my childhood, and well, all of my childhood, and it wasn't until I attended college at 30 years old, I was always a very poor reader, and I hated to read. I would make every excuse in the world not to read, assigned reading. But I decided when I came to college and had to pay for college on my own at that point in time, that I was going to commit to reading every stinking word that was assigned to me. And by doing that, the more I read, and because you're, you know, assigned chapters and, you know, hundreds of pages of reading assignments, by just merely doing it and doing it frequently, you know, I eventually became a faster reader, and with that, my comprehension, you know, increased as well. And it obviously saved time because I didn't necessarily have to read each and every individual word. I was able to move more fluently through the material. So while it sounds a little out there, there is definitely something behind that. So try it. Decide to read faster. And again, using Cengage's, I indicated read out loud feature, but it's voice, text to voice, sorry. And we already talked about creating the vocabulary list, but also PS, spelling is important, even though that's, you know, on the can you read this thing? That, you know, that spelling is not important or that they thought it wasn't important. It is. So pay attention to that. Make sure you're using, oh my gosh, the spell check, you know, on your documents. Oh, the one thing that I believe that doesn't occur, like in your discussion boards as you're typing that information, I don't think there's a spell check feature within that. And so I strongly recommend, if I don't know if this has already been discussed in a previous session, but I strongly suggest that you create your discussion board postings in a Word document, so that way you can utilize that feature. But also, if I'm not mistaken, sometimes the discussion board, as you're typing it, it times out. And if you've, you know, for me, it takes me some time to, you know, gather my thoughts and making it, you know, a cohesive piece of whatever I'm submitting. So oftentimes my discussion board would time out before I was able to send it. So I got in the habit of creating my posts in a Word document, so I was able to utilize that I'm sorry, the spell check feature, and then copy and paste that information into the discussion board and then send it off.
Rose, I'll add too. I just did this yesterday on my computer because I was writing this long paper, and oh my gosh, I was so tired, and trying to read it back, I was not even reading my own work back, you know, as clearly as I wanted. And so I went to text to speech text to speech on Microsoft Word. And if you go into your I guess it's whatever the ribbon is, you can customize and add text to speak. And I mentioned it to my daughter. She was like, Mom, yeah, everybody has that already. But I don't know how many scholars have text to speech already set up that they can just click on in Word. If you do have it set up, just type yes in the chat, because oh my gosh, I could go in and highlight sections of the paper where I knew I was like totally probably falling asleep. I woke up to a page full of D's one time. But it read it back to me, and I was like, oh, I meant students, and I missed the S there, or I missed something there. And because I was reading it over and over myself, I wasn't catching it. But I caught it when the computer read it back to me. So if you're using that in Microsoft Word, just type yes in the chat.
I'm also suggesting, Tiffany, that they use Grammarly. You can create a free account in Grammarly, and you can upload your Word documents there, and they'll do a check to check your grammar, your spelling, your punctuation, things like that prior to turning it in. At this point, I use Grammarly before and I'm a good writer. Don't get me wrong. I've been writing for a long time. I'm a pretty good writer. But I turn in all my assignments, my discussion boards, everything, and I have Grammarly look at it before I turn it in. And some of the suggestions are not going to be things you are going to want to do, but some of them might be, you know, maybe a comma, or, you know, you forgot a word, or, you know, you forgot something else when you're writing. It's a great resource, and especially because you can get their free account.
Nice. That's good to know.
And what, you know what, I want to ask everyone, I know we're talking about close reading and, you know, how to get yourself organized when it comes to your strategies for reading, but there are at least 16 or 17 of you that are in the same psychology course. So my question to you is, how many of you, while it's only been 6 days now, have connected with someone else from this group, so that way you can form smaller study groups? I know a lot of what we were talking about when it comes to reading your textbook, if you have a study group and you say, hey, we're going to go through chapter 1 and let's just spend 30 minutes talking about chapter 1. What I comprehend and take away from chapter 1 might be different from what Lisa takes away from chapter 1 and Rose takes away. But if we have a 30-minute conversation about chapter 1, I'm now reinforcing what I know with the new facts that Lisa shares, the new facts that Rose shares, and I'm taking notes during this conversation. And so while I may not have caught that when I read it the first time, I'm getting the benefit of our group thinking. So have you, type in the chat, been able to connect with one or two people from this EOF Summer Scholars cohort so that way you can have some small study groups? Type yes or no. And if they're mostly no's, then I strongly suggest that you make a connection with someone, because you're not in this alone, okay? There's no reason why you should be trying to figure this out by yourself. And I do have study blocks blocked off in our schedule that if you create these smaller groups that you can go and connect with your social media, just, you know, exchange phone numbers. I can, you know, I don't know if I don't think I can share the GoToMeeting, but you can use Google Meet. I think it's Google Meetup or something like that. You should all have access to that for free, but you can figure out how you can connect. And if you're interested, I see I wish, no, yes, or Zoom. Yeah, Zoom will give you, you can get a free Zoom account. I forget how many people it's up to, but certainly if it's just 2 or 3 of you, you can use Zoom.
I think it's unlimited people, but you only get the 45 minutes with the free version.
I think it's only 40 minutes.
Oh,
Right,
is it
so
40?
You
Yeah.
can do a 40-minute or a 30-minute weekly, you know, kind of discussion, or twice a week if you want to. But I strongly encourage you, this is going to be kind of what's going to set you apart from your peers now and in the future, being able to make those connections and have those conversations. And what if you didn't have a chance to read the whole chapter? You can say, hey guys, you know, I really don't have a whole lot to contribute. I'm going to catch up, but at least you get some insight from your peers. So that's better than having nothing. So
Absolutely.
I just wanted to throw that out there. And next week, this time next week, I'm really going to follow up and find out who's connecting with who, because I'm really serious that it's really going to benefit you in the long run to have someone that you can have these conversations with.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Okay, awesome. So now I'm going to move on to, did anybody have any questions regarding the reading strategies, or any additional comments, thoughts about that? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the effective note taking. Come on, Lucas, please. So why do we take notes? Why bother? We do it because, oh, sorry. To understand and remember more of what we encountered, okay? We also use it to outline important points and to clarify new ideas. So what is it that we do when taking notes? It's important to kind of address note taking in a kind of a three-prong process. Before class, excuse me, you want to make sure that you've got all your homework assignments completed if they're due. If you know, you were handed an assignment that's not due for several weeks, make sure that you have that information available to you, so that if questions arise during class, you'll be able to address them, or sometimes the professors will incorporate information about what their expectation is for the assignment, or provide some clarification with it as well. Now, I do want to mention that these strategies, or these note-taking items, initially, well, they do include for both in-person classes versus, you know, online, and you can basically use this in all types of classes. But I am mentioning some things like, you know, sitting in a front seat and that sort of thing. Well, that's further down on this slide. But these things you can incorporate with pretty much any type of class delivery. But you want to make sure that your homework assignments are completed. You want to make sure that you review notes from a previous class, because chances are your instructor is going to build upon that information that was presented previously. Be prepared. Bring your materials such as your textbook, notebook, pens, pencils, highlighters, erasers, copies of assignments. So that also includes, if you're obviously, let's say if you're doing all online classes and you don't have to come onto campus, make sure that your workspace has all these items available to you. Again, sitting front and center eliminates distractions. You know, if you're somebody that, you know, my first time in college, right out of high school, I was one of those people that sat in the back row and hoped I never got called on. But you know, my second round of college, I made that commitment to myself that I was going to read everything that I was assigned, that I was going to sit in the front row, and that helped immensely in that eliminating distractions. I didn't have to contend with, you know, the students on their phones or having side conversations that were louder than the instructor was speaking. So it just helped me stay focused on what I needed to do, and it was just very helpful. So I strongly recommend that when possible. So during class, you want to make sure that you're asking questions and you're participating in the discussions. A lot of professors will have, you know, attendance grades or participation grades as part of your overall grade. So it's important to be engaged with that process. Then they see that you're being that you're engaged with that whole learning of this material. And it also allows you to clarify any confusing material and encourage memory association. And this is an age-old, I want to say, issue. So many people just feel funny asking questions. And the sooner you get it in your head that that's part of learning, that's the learning process. You know, and if you need clarification or you maybe misunderstood what they said, by asking that question, you're getting that clarification that you need to move forward. If you are basing your response to a question, like a test question or something on assumption that you made, you know, there's a chance that you've assumed incorrectly. So also during class, highlighting and underlining important information, again, whether it's within your textbook, on a note, in your notebook, it again brings, highlights those important aspects that you're likely to be revisiting at some time. So you also want to listen and look for for verbal and non-verbal cues. Instructors may repeat words or phrases such as, you know, this is the main point, this is most important, this is key, and to summarize, blah, blah, blah. Those key words, basically, you want to pay attention to them. Put a star next to them, because those are often something you will see on your you know, on a midterm or within test questions, or because those are the key things that the professor wants you to learn. So if you kind of don't think about it, then you're gonna miss it. So the other thing, you also want to anticipate your professor's lecture style. Again, I mentioned how you're not going to mesh 100% with all your professors and even the course content. A lot of math professors, in an algebra class here, when am I ever going to use this again, right? Doesn't really matter. This is part of your program. It's necessary to move you on those rungs on the ladder of your success, right? So with your professor's lecture style, that's something that you kind of have to adapt to and try to find out what different ways that if you're not connecting well with that style, maybe finding out from one of your classmates who has the same professor, any helpful suggestions that they may have. And it could be something very basic that they bring to mind that makes a difference in you moving forward. So after class, you want to, maybe the words "you want to" isn't accurate, but you should review your notes for 10 minutes. This helps transfer the information from your short-term memory into your long-term memory, because that's really what it's all about. You want to be immersed in this information so that it's more easily accessed. Excuse me. So, and making sure that you understand your notes. You want to edit when necessary for messy handwriting and fill in missing information. So if you're doing that after class and typing your notes within 24 hours, that will require you to review your notes and enable you to save them as well. So whether you decide to also print them out and put them in a binder, and depending on what kind of organization you want to do with that, it may be helpful as well. But if you've just got this constant jumble of incomplete sentences and random words on a piece of paper, it's likely not going to help you to again maintain that information and retain it. So it does take some effort. I love that bird. So now I'm just going to show you some examples of how students may take notes. This first one is one that you're probably most familiar with, the outline method. And as we can see, that the top of this page is forces and creation. While it has the topic indicated, I also recommend that you also include the date on your notes for that day. So that way you can kind of, it'll help you backtrack if needed. And also definitely use separate notebooks for each course. You don't want to intermingle multiple, I should say, if you have a binder, make sure that you separate out and categorize the courses, so that way things don't get intermingled. And again, it'll aid in your ability to retrieve information here. So two other types of note taking. One is boxing, and that's appears on the left. Where basically you're boxing out the various categories of this topic. Then to the right is a charting method example. And the charting, if you Google these different note-taking styles, you can see some very incredibly detailed, color-coded charts. And, obviously, whatever's going to work for you is what you should do. Whatever's going to appeal to you. Now, the other thing I want to mention is the fact that just because, one style of note-taking works well in one particular course, it might not be the best way for you to retrieve information. Whoops, sorry guys. What just happened? All right, sorry. I accidentally hit the little rolly thing on my mouse. All right. So here's the Cornell method of note taking, where basically your notes that you're taking in class basically is that large space on the right of the page where you're identifying the topics and subtopics. And basically the left margin and the bottom where you'd indicate your summary, that you basically do after class, where you're pulling out those highlighted informations and those topics. Again, for your easy reference to revisit the material. That's the whole purpose of taking notes. You know, very few people have the ability to just look at something and it just sticks in their head. Most everybody else has to work at it and revisit things to solidify that learning. So here's also examples of the mapping method. The example on the left, that is clearly for a science course. So, you know, it's very methodical in its presentation, whereas on the right, that mind mapping that Tiffany had mentioned earlier, this is like much more expansive, and you know, it's color coded, and again, whatever's going to work for you, and what, you know, this might not be necessary for, I mean, mind mapping might be much more conducive for, you know, an English topic, or you know, as opposed to, you know, more straightforward with the sciences. But you know, that's the beauty of you finding what's best. You know, you have a lot of options out there, and it can be a little overwhelming, I know, but whatever you, I would suggest experimenting with some of these samples, so that way you could see what's going to work best for you. So, are you a good note taker? So here's, what do we have? 8 questions, I believe. Just take a minute and identify whether yes or no, if these things apply to you. So for pre-lecture, do you read the assigned material? Do you review your notes from previous classes? Do you complete any assignments? And then during the lecture, do you use appropriate headings in your notes? Do you highlight, underline important information? Do you ask questions? After the lecture, do you review your notes for 10 minutes? And do you clarify difficult to read or confusing notes? It's basically revisiting your notes and making those edits that we talked about earlier. So if the more items that you answer yes to, the better note taker this indicates that you are. Now, if a lot of your yeses are in just one section, you want to expand and help enhance your note taking. It's recommended that you begin to incorporate those other areas, those suggestions in those, like for pre-lecture. If you never bothered to do that in the past, maybe you want to start doing that again to enhance your note taking. so that you get the most out of it. So,
Oh, I wanted to add, for those of you who, you know, could relate to the idea of falling asleep while doing some of your course reading, if you're actively taking notes while you're reading, that will also help you stay awake and, you know, be really concentrating on what you're reading.
yep, it's a good point, Lisa.
Rose, I just wanted to add, you mentioned asking questions. And with this new online platform, I know in the psych course especially, there's no paper. And I'm not sure if you have quizzes or anything, but I know that your final exam is cumulative of all the information that you're going to be learning. Your discussion board questions, all of those are cues to kind of direct you on what you need to know for this final exam. But as you're reading through your chapters, I would say at least, especially if you're forming these study groups, out of your study group, you should come up with a couple questions that you pose to Dr. Harrison and say, hey, you know, can you clarify what this definition means and how, you know, how do you use it? You know, how does it apply to everyday life? Give me an example. She'll be happy to give you feedback, but I think those are things that'll help you be more engaged and get a better or deeper understanding about the content that you're learning. Because when you read it over the first time, you need to think about, well, what does this actually mean and how can I actually apply it? That's that deeper level learning that maybe you did not do in high school that is expected in college.
Right. Well, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just going to say, are you getting close to wrapping it up?
Yep. That was my last slide. These are, the references, or the resources, I'm sorry, that I used for putting this together. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Did I not cover something that you had anticipated might be in this presentation that I can address?
If so, type it in the chat so she will know. If you can't think of the question now, Rose is always available. You can email Rose or you can bring it up in our next session. Certainly all of the topics that we're talking about at any point, if you have you know, something that comes up and you want some clarity on, you can ask at any time.
Yep. I was just getting ready to type in my email address, Lisa. Already did it. Beat me to it.
Lisa's monitoring the chat for you.
Yep.
She's a great co-pilot.
That she is.
Why, thank you.
Well, if there are no further questions, we'll come back at 1 o'clock after your lunch break, and we're going to have some fun with the scavenger hunt. Thank you, Barbara McFarland and Lisa. And I've added a few bonus questions, but the scavenger hunt is just going to help you get more familiar with the college and campus resources. And we will have prizes that obviously you won't get immediately because I'll have to mail it to you. But I'll have to see if I'm going to get one top prize or a prize to the top 2 who complete. We'll figure that part out. But there will be prizes, so
I like prizes. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Tiffany,
Good luck.
yes.
for